no fan of the Democrats, not by any stretch of the imagination. I'll go so far as to call them economically illiterate.
Mm-hmm.
However, the welfare warfare state is what makes you less free.
Free Talk Live.
Franklin is on the line listening to WQXL in Columbia, South Carolina. Hello, Franklin.
How's it going?
Hey, you're on the air.
I just wanted to touch on something the last caller mentioned. He made a quip about if there were a civil war, the government would just cut off internet and everyone would be begging for them to turn it back on, and that would be the end of the war.
I thought it was clever.
I obviously think that there are a lot of things that are not worth fighting for, and that I think the context of the Civil War being around race is a bit ridiculous and not likely, thankfully. But in this country, we've heard so much about the revolution and these men that fought for what they felt was right. But I'm seeing so many injustices and moral wrongs being perpetrated by our government. But it seems like there's so much complacency in our lives and our day-to-day. I can get taxed out of the house, and things are just not going well. Money's being spent on things I find immoral, and still I come home and have a TV and can relax, and there's plenty of food and all those things.
Right.
So I just wonder what your guys' thoughts are about where that threshold for rebellion would be if we didn't have those creature comforts.
Well, I think that's you hit the nail on the head, is that revolutions aren't fought by people who have full bellies. That's really what it comes down to, is it's just funny, except in France, by the way. Those people rise up over anything. And I have a certain level of respect for that, honestly.
Me too.
They consider their democracy, their republic, to be a participatory situation, and they're willing to protest. Americans, they don't do that. And, well, for better or for worse, Americans don't do that. Mostly, I consider what the hoi polloi, the democracy, the greater population want to be nonsense. Largely, that they don't know what they're looking for, that democracy is just pitting groups against each other and it's just a system for creating hate, for creating animosity.
And the politicians division. Benefit from that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what they want. They want to ping pong back and forth between a Republican and a Democrat president for the next X number of decades as they continue to enrich themselves, as we all continue to work to benefit them.
Right. They get more powerful, they get more wealthy, and we all get less free.
I think the only thing you can do to revolt is to withhold your money from them in some way, shape, or form.
One of the ways to do that is through cryptocurrency. You can take money out of the old money, old banking, government money system and put it into something that they basically can't touch. So that's one way to do it. The more you can do to make yourself independent from that system, I would agree, is definitely a good thing. Franklin, anything else you want to share tonight? Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I guess with that, that's a sad thing to hear in a lot of ways, that we just, as a culture, are so quick to trade what we view as right and worthy. I mean, I understand what you're saying about revolutions not being fought on full bellies.
I mean, look at Venezuela right now.
They were very wealthy. They were very wealthy men, and they
okay. The founding fathers, the ones that you studied about, were from wealthy families, but there were people who picked up guns that weren't from those families, and those wealthy people screwed the hell out of the people that fought for them. Check out Shays' Rebellion afterwards. The rich people that took over the government of the United States weren't much better than the rich people that they took it over from.
That figures.
But can we agree that the government that they set up was better initially, at least?
I don't know. Let's compare it today. Is Canada significantly worse than the United States?
No, actually, it ranks.
So. I mean, I think
no, it's not.
I would say, I mean, with the free speech.
Impact, they're not as. They don't have as free a speech, and they have that. Their medicine is socialized. That much is true. But if you check out the Heritage Foundation, not exactly a liberal organization, and their rankings of the countries of the world, you'll find that Canada is considered freer, as is New Zealand.
Economically free.
Yeah, economically freer.
Yeah, but the free speech thing is a linchpin
No, it's not.
Society
You've had free speech all along. Look where you're at. Slightly worse than Canada.
Right. Well, it hasn't made things more free, I guess, is what you're pointing out, Mark. That even though the U.S. has freedom of speech, you got guns and speech. The U.S. is absolutely the world's police force. It is absolutely the dominating force on the planet right now, and that's not a good thing. That's not helping freedom. That's actually, impoverishing us and transferring wealth to the politically connected, and transferring wealth from the political system to military-industrial complex and other industrial complexes. So, I mean, we're screwed pretty bad here.
No, well, I don't deny that things are bad in terms of economic freedom, and I'd like to look into that heritage study. But to negate the value of free speech, I mean, I think that really is crucial.
I'm not negating the value of free speech. I'm just telling you it hasn't resulted in more freedom overall, because it's not just the Heritage Foundation. It's also, I believe, Free the World, which
it's not the only.
It's Cato, but there's another organization.
Yeah, Cato does one too. It's not the only one that does it.
Canada beats the U.S. on both of those charts.
It also beats the U.S. in freedom of the press. It also beats the U.S. in rule of law.
In Canada, there's been with the transgender issue and the transferring or gender reassignment of young children. That's come to light where the government is backing a child's decision and removing that child from their family if the family doesn't go along with the child's desire to have a sex.
This is what we call cherry picking. You're aware of that, right? You can find some. Look,
we can find all kinds of bad things about every government.
That's bad. You're right.
No,
I'm just saying that people who do this for a living, social scientists, have done studies, and they say
studies of studies. Yeah, studies, meta-studies, right?
Meta-studies of studies, and they find that Canada is freer. You can argue it that you don't like some things that Canada's done, and I will agree with you. I don't like some things the UK's done. I don't like some things that lots of countries have done.
We can go down the list.
I'll even go one step further with you. I consider the state, any organization that claims to rule a given geographic area, to be the most successful gang in that geographic area. They're nothing but a criminal organization. However,
all of them.
That doesn't change the fact that this study was done, and they found that Canada was slightly freer than the U.S.
We got more coming up. Thanks for the call, Franklin. I appreciate the discussion. Our number here is 855-450, free like freedom. Since we're talking about it, we might as well bring up the list, and because it's not just Canada, it's a bunch of other countries that are higher up than the U.S.
The U.S. is 18. Yeah. Land of the free, home of the brave, number 18.
Woo! Go team.
One thing is that these indexes are put together by groups of social scientists and professors and stuff like that, and they get sponsored different years by different organizations sometimes too.
So this is Cato and Fraser Institute. Those are the two organizations that were involved in putting this list together.
So we would call Cato mainstream libertarian. Fraser Institute, I don't know that much about.
Fraser Institute, I believe, is Canadian, aren't they?
If I'm not mistaken. I think they're foreign, but I don't know.
Go ahead and check that one on, if you don't mind, Fraser Institute. So this was a surprise to me after Hong Kong was number one on this list for years. I mean, we've been talking about this list for, more than a decade now, Mark, on Free Talk Live? It seems like we've been doing this for a long time. Hong Kong has been the number one country, and it's not really a country. It's kind of like a little carve-out of China at this point. But it, for whatever reason, is listed separately from China, and there's a big difference between Hong Kong and China on this list.
Yes, it is Canadian.
So Hong Kong is down to number 3, with New Zealand taking the top spots as the number 1.
That's pretty impressive.
And they're ranking, by the way, both personal and economic freedom here on this chart.
Which is a difficult thing to do. What is personal freedom and what's it mean to you? Freedom itself is a difficult term to define. What we define it as here on Free Talk Live is the freedom to do what you want so long as it doesn't harm somebody else.
Sure.
And when that takes on the role of the state, of a government, that means the ability of people to do things and a structure of what they want, basically, and a structure of rule of law that allows them to get recompense from their neighbor when their neighbor steps across that line, the line of not harming them while they're doing what they want. So that's how they should be defining it.
Number 2 on the list. Again, New Zealand, number 1. Number 2, Switzerland, having moved up a rank. I guess. And then Hong Kong had jumped down to number 3, Australia at number 4, Canada at number 5, the Netherlands at 6, tied apparently for 6 with Denmark. Ireland at number 8, because I guess they left out number 7 because of the 6
to tie,
6 being tied.
Two sixes, yeah.
So Ireland and the UK tied for number 8, and then a 3-way tie for number 10 between Finland, Norway, and Taiwan.
Taiwan's moving up the chart, and deservedly so.
They jumped up 7 points, apparently, or 7 slots. And then
Keeping an eye on Taiwan, personally.
Germany at 13, Estonia at 14, Luxembourg at 15, Austria at 16, and finally, up 1 from last year at number 18. They're now number 17, the United States, on the list of human freedom.
That deserves some applause.
Yay!
Good job, United States, moving up the charts. Yeah, I mean, this is something I think is just news to Americans. It's done. This guy who called in.
Sorry, I didn't notice. Sweden is also tied for 17 with the United States, so it's actually not even in its own
17 and
place.
18.
Yeah.
What this gentleman who just called in, I can't remember what his name was off the top of my head, but he was obviously well informed. He understood history and these kinds of things. This came as a surprise to him.
Yeah,
because it's not getting talked about on mainstream media. Isn't discussing that the United States is losing its freedoms, that it's becoming progressively less free over time, that wars that are started by Republicans are largely the reason. Look, I am no fan of the Democrats. No fan of the Democrats. Not by any stretch of the imagination. I'll go so far as to call them economically illiterate.
Mm-hmm.
However, the welfare warfare state is what makes you less free. And it's the warfare part doesn't help at all.
Since we had brought up, or I guess one of the callers allowed us to sort of bring up these different studies that are being done of global freedom, both economic and personal. We've got the one here from the Cato Institute and the Fraser Institute, which combines both economic and personal freedoms into one score. So they've got 2 different scores for personal and economic freedom, and they come up with whatever the total score is for overall human freedom. And we kind of gave you some of the top on the list, and I'll just recap briefly. New Zealand has taken the top spot and taken it away from long-time top spot holder Hong Kong, although a long time they only did economic freedom, so maybe the personal freedom factor kind of changed things a little bit once they started factoring that in over the last, because I think this is newish within the last few years.
Yeah, Hong Kong's become more democratic in the sense that they want their opinions heard, and to my mind, democracy is really where you see the downfall of any real freedom, because it's nice to have your rights respected, but when your rights can be determined by the majority, you don't have rights anymore.
Yep, you're in trouble. And of course, as we've seen, just because you call it a republic doesn't mean that it's going to be much more respecting of rights.
No, just because somebody uses North Korea uses the term republic.
Actually, let's go all the way down to the bottom of the list and see how many republics there are. Let's see. Within the bottom 5, there's a republic.
Yes.
So let's start at the very bottom, number 162. Now, remember, there are some countries that are exempted from this list due to there's just not enough information coming from these locations. It's hard to discern, anything about them. So, like North Korea is a good example.
It's not on the list
of one of the ones that is not on the list. So, of the countries in the world that are ranked on this list, it does go up to 162. What is the least economically free ranked country in the world?
I'm supposed to guess?
Just take a stab in the dark.
Eritrea.
I'm not seeing. Oh, yeah, I'm not seeing that in the bottom 10 here. Just a quick glance.
Begins with an E.
Syria is number 162, down 3 spots from the previous year. However, it's making headway here, moving down the list as fast as it can. Venezuela down 4 spots in the last year.
The socialists will tell you that's the sanctions the United States government has put on them. I don't even understand this. Like, how you can look at this situation. Not to say that the United States government's sanctions put on Venezuela haven't been, a bad thing. If they weren't a bad thing, the United States government wouldn't have done it. However, you have to be an economic moron to think that the United States' sanctions somehow cause Venezuela to pump more money into its system constantly.
Right. Number 3, or rather the third least free, is the Republic of Yemen.
Okay. Well, a lot of these places are at war, but...
Well, don't worry. There are other republics on the bottom 50 here as well. Yeah. Iraq is the 4th least free. Libya, 5th least. Sudan, 6th least. Egypt, Algeria, Burundi.
I'm sure I'm glad that so many Americans fought and died for the freedom of Iraq.
So other republics on the list here, the Central African Republic at 152, followed by the Congo Republic at, it looks like, 136. And then, of course, don't forget the fact that the North Korea, which isn't even ranked here, is also a republic, Democratic People's Republic of Korea.
DPRK.
Yep. And, of course, China, I believe, calls itself a republic, and it's not doing so hot on this list either at number 135.
If you're a real good conservative, you always say Red China.
Jason in Texas. Jason, where are you at in Texas tonight?
Texarkana.
Welcome. You must be listening to, I think, KFLS. Go ahead with your thoughts.
Okay. Just real quick about the government. I do agree on some points, probably most of them, about the government. But, I mean, it could be worse. Do you not agree?
That it could be worse?
I'm sorry, it's KTFS. I apologize to the other station.
No problem.
Anyway, go ahead.
We are allowed to pretty much, free speech to an extent, and we're allowed to progress and live a fairly safe life.
Safety is not freedom.
No?
No. You have to have freedom taken from you by these politicians for them to promise that you're going to be safe, but they don't actually make you any safer. So you just end up losing your freedom. I mean, look at the TSA. What a joke.
They should be renamed the water bottle confiscators. Yeah, I would agree with you. Certainly it could be worse. I mean, we're reading a list here of 168 nations. The United States is number 17.
Number 17.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Could be worse.
It could be worse. They could be at 27, 77, or 137. Those things are true. I think that it is incumbent upon good Americans to sound the alarm that the United States is heading in the wrong direction and has been under both Democrats and Republicans for the last few decades.
Yeah.
That, while we wave the flag and say the pledge and weep as FA-18s fly over our football games, politicians have been hard at work taking as much of your money and as much of your freedom as they possibly can get. And so, some people will call me an anti-patriot. As a matter of fact, I'll go so far as to argue patriotism enables these thieves and shysters to do what they do. So, could it be worse? Yeah, 100%, man. The United States is a great place to make a living. Then retire someplace else after you've made the money.
That I have thought about, actually. I was in the military.
Good Americans often think about this.
New Zealand, number 1 on the list.
Well, I don't do New Zealand because of the cost of living.
And now what was number 1 on the list?
New Zealand.
This is
year.
the 2018 numbers from the Cato Institute and, Fraser Institute. Number 1, New Zealand, followed by Switzerland, Hong Kong, Australia, Canada, Netherlands, Denmark, Ireland, UK, Finland, Norway, Taiwan, Germany, Estonia, Luxembourg, Austria, United States.
Oh, wow. Hong Kong and Thailand. I wouldn't have thought they'd been on there.
Hong Kong was very free. It was set up as a British...
Taiwan, not Thailand. I apologize. Taiwan.
The big difference. Hong Kong was set up as a British trading zone with China, and the guy who set it up was basically a proto-libertarian, understood what economic freedom was and how great it would be. Hong Kong has actually been significantly more free, and it's their new democratic movements that are making it less free now. Taiwan is moving forward because they, it's basically have had some good politicians elected up to this point, which means it always can change at any time.
Wow. Hey, that's awesome. Hey, I really appreciate
Jason.
it, guys.
Appreciate your call, brother.
Get y'all's thought there.
Yeah, thanks for making the call tonight. I appreciate it. Toll-free number tonight, 855-450, free.
And this is the tightrope upon which we walk here, Ian, is that on one hand, we have to advocate for freedom, which means advocating essentially against government. On the other hand, people are going to say, well, if you don't like this government, which government do you like? If you don't like this government, why don't you go someplace else? It's the thing that's constantly said. And by all means, ladies and gentlemen, I will go someplace that is more free. significantly more free. I'm not willing to trade it for a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I like America. I grew up here. There's lots of things that I'm very comfortable with. But don't think that my loyalties lie with a nation that's going into ruins.
Free Talk Live. Listen live 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern or grab the podcast. It's all at freetalklive.com.